It's time now to understand these three concepts: calculated column and calculated table and measure. Okay, so as the name suggests, calculated column, it is going to be part of your table, existing table. So we have a physical columns. As part of the tables we have columns and rows, and if you wanted to create a new column based on some derivation, based on some business rule or formula, you can create it. But the column which you created using the, when you created this calculated column, this one will be your part of your table. But this column, the calculated column, it will be visible in your data view. But if you use Power Query editor, you cannot see the column, that the calculated column which you created and made it as part of your table. You cannot see it in Power Query editor because this is in memory. The calculated columns will be there in memory. Okay, so in simple time, using we create calculated column if you want to perform any row by row calculation. For example, you want to find out the total sales. Okay, in your data set you have only quantity and you have the one second, quantity and price is a simple example. You have quantity and price column is there, and if you want to find out the sales value or sales amount for each line item, each item is order ID 1, order ID 2, for each order, if you want to find out the sales amount, this column, let us know if it is not there in your file, the data set whatever given to you, in that it is not there. So what we do is we need to find out, we need to multiply quantity into price in order to get the sales amount. So this is the derived variable. For this, this is called your calculated column. What we do is we create the calculated column based on the existing columns. Not necessarily existing columns, you can based on some formulas also. Okay, for example, if you want to do, if you want to do, discount, right? If you want to find out discount in terms of percentage, you want to display that. So if the discount is in terms of decimal value and discount into 100, that gives you in terms of percentage. If you want to do some kind of simple calculation, you don't need to use the existing columns. But in simple term, even discount is also already, it is there in my tables column. Yeah, we can say that we can derive a new column based on the existing column. We can say even in the case of discount we are deriving, right? The discount is also part of my table. Sometimes they say something like the number of quantities sold more than. So even in that case you need to use the existing column to derive the variable. The calculated column is, in simple term, it is a derived variable. We derive this column based on the existing columns values. So in that case what we do is we create the calculated column sales amount. So in the case sales amount value will be computed row by row. For each row it has to compute this one. Another example, the age of the customer. It's, the customer's age is something like stored in the column date of birth. To find out his age, you can use date function, using which you can extract the years, right? So till date, what is the starting date of birth. If you pass it as an argument and year as the second argument, you will get the number of years passed since his birth. Okay, in that case, let's say 42 years or 32 years or 38 years, it will be derived, right? So you are row by row. For each customers, you need to use date function to derive the years, right? The age of the customers. So it is calculated row by row. So hence we call it a row context. Remember, this is very important term, row context. When it comes to calculated column, it is right. So it is computed in row context, and it is stored in memory. The calculated column stored in the memory, and it is calculated at the time of refreshing the report. Or if you schedule the report in the Power BI service, if you go and schedule the report to refresh the data on a specific time, that point in time the calculated column will get the value in the calculated column will get refreshed. Okay. Manual also, you can manual refresh. Okay, you can manual refresh and schedule refresh. End of the day, if you do refresh, only when you do the refresh, the calculated column, the values in the calculated column will get refreshed. Look here, this is the example. So the sales amount and the cost. So the sales minus cost, that is the one will give you the profit. So each and every row, we need to, row by row, we need to, row by row, you need to calculate this one to get the profit. So hence we call this a row context. The calculated columns are works in the row context. Next we have something called measures. Measures in general, we use it for aggregations. Sum, average, so those kind of situations we use a measure. You remember in the previous session we used measures to obtain the count x, count a, count ax, all those things. The difference between the calculated column and measures, okay, so here you perform aggregations, okay, on a column, okay, for entire column. So let's say you have sales amount. So for the entire value in this column, you are performing the sum. Okay, you are total sales. Okay, instead of obtaining the values row by row, it obtains the values for the entire column. Right. In the case of aggregations, we use measures. Another difference between measure and calculated column is it is calculated on the fly. Only when you use a measure in your visual, this one will get computed. This will not live in your memory. This you need to remember it. Okay, using a measure, you can aggregate all the rows in the data and return the result. There are various aggregation functions, sum x, average, and we can use calculate function, this kind of a helper function, okay, and using which you can you can do a lot of you can extend your analytics because it has a lot of features in it, the calculate functions. So the measures are very much useful if you want to perform some aggregation in the sense summarization, okay, or if you want to perform some aggregations up to the minute, right, you want to perform some kind of up to the minute calculations, then you will use measure. So last session I showed you, I wanted to find out the count of the customer's name column and count of units sold or count of sales, right? So how many number of count used to take into account of only the non-empty values. It ignores the empty values. That is what we discussed. So for that we created a measure, right? So only when you drag and drop that measure into your table or any visual, the values, the aggregations will be performed on the fly. Okay, only when you call that, you will compute that. Otherwise, the data will not reside in the memory. Okay, so that is why I use this term. It is calculated on the fly. Next one is, within this measure there are two types. Other one is implicit measure, other one is explicit measure. What is implicit measure? You might have noticed this one in the Power BI desktop. 1 second, I'll just show you. If you see here, see on the right side, the profit and all the numeric variable, right? The Power BI desktop, what it does is automatically creates and calculates a measure to aggregate the data, okay, based on the data type, right? It automatically detects the data type that we know that. So if it detects, Power BI, as soon as it detects a numeric variable, what it does is it calculates a measure. It calculates a measure to aggregate this data, okay, to aggregate the data. And by default, the default aggregation in the case of implicit measure is sum. If I click on this, look here, when I select this sales column, you can find something like the summarization, sigma kind of notation, sum. I did not do anything. I did not assign this one. Okay, I did not tell Power BI that do the summarization. By default, for the numeric variable, it performs the aggregation behind the scene. The default aggregation is sum. You can change it if you wanted to change it. Just click on the drop down list wherein you can select whichever the type of the aggregation that you want. You can select it. Okay, so but the default one is, this is called implicit measure. Look at shipping cost. Shipping cost is a numeric variable. Profit is also numeric. Quantity is also a numeric variable. But sometimes what will happen is we have to be we have to be very clear on this. And so sometimes though Power BI deducts all the columns as a numeric variable, the aggregation is not applicable for all columns. For example, I have a numeric variable called employee ID. In that case, employee ID is a numeric values. Okay, just because you have numeric values in your employee ID column, if you perform sum on that aggregation, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this is what called implicit measure. By default, Power BI performs the aggregation for the numeric variables. By default, it uses sum. Okay, but explicit measure is, we are the one, based on the use case, we create the measure explicitly. In this case, I did not create any measure. For example, I wanted to create a measure. If I want to create a measure, I need to go to modeling ribbon, and here I need to use click on the new measure. So calculated table will be created. It's a temporary table that will be a subset of your tables data. When you perform any aggregation, if you want to store the subset of that in the table, that is when the calculated table is playing an important role. To summarize, the calculated column, in the case of calculated column, it performs the row by row calculation. The data is stored in the memory, hence it consumes memory. It is calculated at the time of refreshing the report. The measures, we discussed about measures. It calculated based on all filters. I told you filter context. I'll explain you this one, don't worry. Okay, the measures is not stored like calculated columns in memory. It is not a pre-calculated one. It is calculated on the fly. Only when you put the measure on your report page, it will perform an aggregation. Okay, it consumes CPU. So now the question is, can I use when can I use calculated column? When can I use measure? Okay, most of them, they get especially the beginners, they get confused with this. And when can I use these two? When can I use calculated column? When to use this one? Okay, so if you want to perform any row by row operation in simple term, then you can go for calculated column. If you want to perform any kind of aggregate, sum of sales or count of products or count of transactions, total number of transactions, if you use any aggregation function in general, right, in that kind of situation, measure is our friend. Okay, so that is what you need to remember it. Next, we will see what are the types of context. We discussed about row context. In the case of calculator, it uses the row context. It is pretty straightforward. The next one is the filter context. What is filter context? This is very much important. You need to understand this concept very well. This is the fundamental building blocks for the DAX. Okay. The filter context used whenever a measure is calculated. Okay, whenever a measure, look here, in this case the total sum of sales is this one. I'll just show you here with the Power BI. So this is my measure. Okay, and let's say I just create another visual. I just click on a matrix here. Instead of matrix, I use a table. what I do is I just select this table, and then I just select the region. I just select the region. This is one thing. I just copy paste this one. Sum of sales, I just drag and drop it here. So in this case, I've used a chord visual wherein I used the sum of sales measure. The same thing I just dragged and dropped into the table. Okay, here I can see only one value here, the total sales. Okay, so now if I add, let's in this case, if I add region along with this, so what is happening here? It is no longer a single value. This is not a single value here. So when I added the region dimension to this visual, the Power BI, what it does, it goes to the sales column and filters the column for each country and sums the total. It filters the column for each country. For this, or in this case region, right? It filters the region. It filters the column. It filters the column for each region and sums the total. So what is it goes the sales column, and then it checks, right, what is the overall sales for Africa. So this is the overall sales for Africa. Okay, so if I go here, okay, right, so here you cannot see it. Anyhow, this is not a detailed transaction. For example, instead of this one, see, this is my explicit measure. Okay, and to understand one second, I just remove this one for the time being. When I select this is also a measure, but it is an implicit measure. This is created by Power BI itself. We did not create it. So this one and the measure what I created explicitly, both of them are same. But one advantage with this one is the implicit measure is, if you click on this here and if you select don't summarize, look here, Africa sales, it shows in detail. By adding all these values only, what we have seen earlier was the sum of all the values of the Africa for each and every country. When you use a measure, what it does is it goes to this sales column, it sums. Okay, it sums all the values for each and every country. Okay, it filters the column, right? It filters this column values. It filters the column values for each region and sums the total. You understood? If I enable the sum, that is what is happening. But in Excel, can you do like this? In Excel, if you want to do it simply, for example, if I give you one number like this, and if I tell you this is the total sales, can you tell me the breakup of the of this? Can you give me the breakup or by region? If I ask you this question, so what you have to do? You need to take your another Excel sheet wherein you have the detailed sales for each month, and you need to compute the sales for each and every month. You cannot do some kind of group by, right? It's not that easy. But when it comes to Power BI, that's where the filter context is coming into picture. When it comes to filter context, as soon as I dragged and dropped in the country column, the region column along with this measure, it automatically shows me the split up for each country. The total sales split up for each country, each region. Region as country name itself. Okay, that's why I'm saying keep calling this a country. So now you understood. I just repeat one more time. I'm going to remove the region here. This is my table. Instead of dragging and dropping, see here I just dragged and dropped the same measure here. It shows only one value here, the total sales. If I want to get the breakup or breakdown by region, all I have to do is drag and drop the categorical variable. What is my categorical variable? Here, for example, instead of using that, I'm going to use segment here. The moment when I selected the categorical variable segment, automatically it gives me the split up. If you add all these three, you will get this value. So that is the beauty of Power BI. You don't have to manually go and compute. If somebody says, can you give me this is the total value, so can you give me the breakup of this? Again, you need to open another Excel sheet wherein you have the consumer segment, each and every day how much we sold, and you need to summarize. You don't have to have that headache here. So this is called filter context. This is very important. Though it is simple, many of them they get kind of confused. So it is also falls under evaluation context. The one is the row context and the other one is filter context. Row context, row by row. The filter context, this is what is filter context is all about. So whenever a measure is calculated, right, the filter context is used. So automatically it filters. So consumer wise sales and corporate, what is the total sales for corporate? What is the total sales for home office? All these three segments put together, what is the overall sales? This is what we got it by using measure, but the split up is taken care automatically by the filter context. In this case, we have used only one dimension segment. If you want to use more dimensions, if you want to perform slice and dice with that, right, the more columns are being filtered by the filter context in each cell of the matrix visual. If I want to use one more dimension, the category is the lesser value in it. I'm going to use it here. So when you use the matrix, matrix, in this case I use matrix. If you want to filter it consumer wise, the consumer and furniture, row column filtering is done automatically. Look here. This is beautiful. It gives me the row level total. For each row it gives me the row total, and it gives me for each column the column level total and the overall total it gives me. So this one matches with this value. So here this one dimension, this is one dimension, this is second dimension. The second dimension is category. If you want to slice and dice with more than one dimension, right, so it filters more than one column. That's what happened. So in this case it filtered this column and this column. Okay, next what we will do is we will jump into, in simple term, filter context filters the data and the row context iterates the table. Row by row it iterates. That's all. So there are different types of DAX functions are there, time intelligent functions are, date and time functions are there, logical functions are there, and information functions. Status likewise, various overall 10 different categories. You can find DAX functions. And variables, we'll discuss it later. Variables also important. You should be knowing how to use the variables. What we will do is we will jump into the average, because last week we discussed about count X and sum X also. Now let us understand what is average, AverageA, AverageX. What is count A, count X? Count, you can perform using count you can find out the total number of values in a column excluding the blank values. The same thing. Instead of count we are taking the average. What is count A? Count A, you can use it on a text and numeric value in a column, but even in the case of AverageA, it excludes the blank values. In case you have any blank values in a column which has the combination of text and number values in it, then you can go for AverageA. AverageX, in this case, it evaluates the expression. Okay, based on the expression, whatever you specify it, for that it is performing the average. Even in this case, it excludes the blank value. Very simple one. I just take the same data or some other, or let us use the same thing. I just go and create a measure. Or average number of quantity, how much we sold it. This is painful, it takes a hell lot of time. What I do is I use something called DAX Studio. You can go and download DAX Studio, it is pretty faster, and when it comes to execution, and also you don't have to go and click each and every time calculated column, calculated measure. It's painful thing. Instead, you can download. It's a open source kind of thing. You can type it in Google, download DAX Studio. You can download it. Okay, it's a freeware. I'll show you how to. Once you download, installation very simple. Once once it gets downloaded, you need to keep clicking yes, next. It will get installed. Look here. So it will, by default, it will be there here. Okay, when you open the DAX Studio, by default it will be the default one is tabular server. I select this one because this is my current file, right? So this is my current file, untitled. I did not give any name for this. So hence you need to select your current Power BI report file name here. So here I have opened one more. I don't want to use this one. I want to use this one because this is where we are working on it. If I click connect, it will get connected to my Power BI desktop. Look here, whatever the table that you have it here, that you can see it here. Okay, and the date table you can ignore it, and template something else. So monthly sales. Okay, and if you right click on it, and if you want to see the preview data, if you click on it, it will show you like in SQL Server. When you do top or in MySQL, are we using? No, MySQL we use limit. In the Microsoft SQL Server, to find out the top 500 records, we use top n function. Evaluate, you need to start with evaluate. So what I do is, I don't want to see the data in this data file. I'm interested in finding out this one. So you need to start with evaluate. Remove the measure name. Press F5. When you press F5, okay, here it is not working here. Evaluate, or 1 second, evaluate. You need to select this one and simply format code. If you give this one, it will give you the format of this one. Okay, and yeah, somewhere if you don't specify the thing correctly, it will cause problem. Evaluate is not working here, right? So 1 second. Okay, what we will do is, for summarize it was working. Okay, I'll just tell you later. So evaluate is to so this is very easy. You don't have to go here and there to create a new measure and all the things. Okay, so anyhow, I'll just show you little later. create another measure. Takes a lot of time. I'm going to say AverageA on. So let's say I'm going to use something like so when it comes to DAX, you need to use some calculate and all. It should work actually speaking, but it is in our case it is not working. This is done, and I'm going to use something like very well, x is an iterating function. First argument is table. It's very much friendly here. Table is in this case monthly sales, and comma expression. You can give something like you can use something like filter here, filter function. Here I want to find out the average sales for a specific condition here. For example, here I want to find out the region. I want to find out filter, or else let me do one thing, quantity. So here also I need to specify a table name, monthly sales, comma this one. The expression is something like quantity is greater than 0. Wherever the greater 0 is there, ignore that, because I don't want to take into account of 0 value. So null value is taken care automatically by AverageX, but for those items we sold more than 0, for that you find out the average. When I press enter, it will get created. In case of any syntax error, look here there is a syntax. Expression refers to multiple columns. Multiple columns cannot be converted to a scalar value. So here there is a x, because here I am using a table here, it is not working well here. In this case it is not correct. Simply what I do is I do. So anyhow, I just simply say, instead of this one, I filter and alright. First let us use this one, or you can say quantity into price is there, right? So sales, monthly sales, price is not there here. Okay. Or let me do one thing here. I just use, since I don't have the price column, sales, simply I'll use sales and discount. Not, this is for the average. The simple one. This is my expression. Okay. So this is a table. Whenever you find the function name ends with x, that means that is an iterating function. This iterating function falls under average family. When you use iterating function, which means the function name ends with x, the first argument is supposed to be table. Don't forget this. It is not a column. Okay, this is an expression you need to give it. So we created 3 measures now. Next, what I do is I just quickly create a table here, and here all the things that I'm going to drag and drop it. Average measure. For example, I just say the region. So this is the average discount. Average discount we have given for each country. And the next one is I just select average measure. So here I don't see anything here. Here what is that we have chosen it? Here monthly sales category. Oh, okay. So here I have taken category, right? So here it shows 0 here. Okay, anyhow, I'll just use something because AverageA, in our case, it doesn't make any sense. Average discount and the average number of units, average units sold in each region. Fine. The next one is AverageX measure. So this is where we use that formula. So using the AverageX function, in this case what it performs the average by evaluating this expression, or the output of this expression. For the output of this expression, it performs the average. Okay, fine. So this is what the average, this is what the AverageA and average function. Okay, so these three are same as your count, but instead of doing count here, it does the average. So here you can use average function on a numeric value or quantitative variable. It excludes the blank value, and similarly here also it excludes in all 3 cases it excludes the blank value. Very simple. The only difference between these two is AverageA, like a count, right? AverageA performs the average on both text and numeric value. In this case, text is not there. Okay, but practically speaking, if you include any text value along with any numeric value, it becomes automatically text data type, isn't it? And so in that kind of situation you'll be using it. The AverageX is if you want to evaluate certain, or if you want to perform some kind of calculation. For this calculation, if you want to find out the average, you can use AverageX. Okay, for example, we take the net price and then multiply that by quantity into net price. Okay, so with that we will get the sale amount, each line amount, right? We'll get the average line amount, right? Average value for. Okay, Vijayakant, tell me count A when will be used? When will count A will be used? Same as count A. Count A will be used if you have both numeric value as well as the text value in a column. But don't literally go by the documentation. Even the documentation, there are some confusion. Okay, Microsoft document, whatever they mentioned, right? So if you have the Boolean value, count A we possibly we can use. Count A we possibly we can use. Where? Okay, what you are saying is, but average is not possible, right? Average is not possible, right? No, count A and average A does the same thing in one aspect. In which aspect? Using count A and average A, using count, we can find the total number of values in a column. For example, you have a let's say you have a region column, and the region column, how many number of values are there? Okay, you will have some blank value, non-blank value. Somewhere blank value will be there. So when you use count, let's say I have 100 records are there, and the 100 records, 10 records are blank for region column. That means the total number of values in a region column is 90. The remaining 10 is blank value. It ignores the blank value. For an so this is for a text column. Numeric also the same thing. In the case of numeric value, it takes into account of only the non-empty value. It's as simple as that. Same thing is applicable. Average also, in the case of average, it takes into account of only non-empty value. See, something like say in your table you have something on 20, you made 23,000 rupees sale, and it's a 10,000 sale and 5,000 sale. Okay, and if I ask you average, listen, you have some blank value here. If you add, will you see here, you have non-blank values are only 3, right? So 23 plus 10, 33 plus 5, 38. 38 divided by 3 only supposed to be, you are supposed to specify. Instead, if you take into account of blank, what will happen? 38 by 5, right? This is wrong actually. It will show your average less, right? Higher the denominator value, lesser the value you will get it. Right? This is not the correct way of doing it. Hence, it ignores the blank. Count, in the case of count function, in the case of average function, and even in the case of AverageA, it ignores the blank. But the difference between average and average is same as count and count here. But when it comes to average, it does the average. When it comes to count, it does the count. Okay, here in this case, I am talking about average. Okay, don't get confused. Count means, okay, what is the difference between count and average? How many values are there? 1, 2, 3. When in the case of count, if somebody is asking what is the output of this column's count, if I apply the count on this column, what is the value? 1, 2, 3. You will simply exclude this one. If somebody is asking average FEA, this is the correct value. 3 values, exclude the blank value, and this is the one. In this case also you are excluding the blank value, and then you are telling in this column we have only 3 values are there. The same as here in this column we have 3 values are there, but here you literally take each and every value and you add it. 23 plus 10 plus 5 divided by 3. Instead of putting 5, you put 3. If you put 5, it does not make sense, right? But when it comes to average, what he says is, let's say you have 23 and you have something like AB and 24, something like that. Okay, in that case, you can go for average A. Average A work on both the numeric and text value. Probably you can try with the text data type. Okay, put some text value, in the case of, let's say create a column. In that column you put the values like this and use average A. This is what we tried in the count A, isn't it? Count A function. But when it comes to text function, the text data type, it was not able to identify the empty values. That is the problem. We replace the empty by string by blank, and then you need to check that. See, you remember, I told you there is a bug with that tool. Okay, in the case of Power Query editor, it was saying that there was no blank space is there. Take this example, 1, 2, 3. We have 2 blank values are there. It was not showing the blank values as empty or empty string. It shows 0. But when I use something like count blank, you remember we use count blank. When you use count blank, it was showing very clearly 2 blank records were there. Without even replacing the blank value by blank function, it was showing 2 blank space. There is a the contradicting output. We saw that between the DAX and Power Query, right? Actually what DAX was giving was the correct thing, but when it comes to Power Query editor, it considers them as a empty string. You need to replace the empty string by blank explicitly in order to find out the count. Don't blindly apply average A on this type of column. Okay, so it will not work. But when it comes to DAX also, right, it is better. You can do the data cleaning by replacing the blank value. For the text data type, blank value doesn't mean it is a empty, a blank, null. Okay, you need to explicitly replace the null by blank. You remember blank, I used that function, okay, in the calculated column. So average, AverageA, AverageX. Now we understood. The next one is the calculated column and measure. Also we have seen it. Calculated column also we have seen it. The SumX function we will take a look at it little later. And what I do is the next one is we will get into the all function. That is very much important. Difference between all and all selected. Instead of going here, I'll just show you with the example. I know you'll be able to understand very clearly. Now I'm going to explain you something called calculate function along with, okay, I'll just go here for calculate function because I'll have to explain the concept, only then you should be able to understand. See, we have something called calculate function. This is one of the important function in Power BI. You can use any DAX function as part of calculate function. Okay, the first argument is an expression, right? This calculate function, it evaluates an expression, right? There are two parts here, okay, the aggregation and the filter, okay, or the expression or the filter. Okay, so let's say you want to see a specific north region. I want to find out the total sales, average sales. Okay, you can use the average, sum, everything as part of calculate. So you can use calculate, sorry, as part of calculate you can use all kind of functions, but you cannot use a calculate inside a calculate. Okay, and importantly, using calculate function we can modify the filter context. This is very important. The calculate function helps us to override the filter context or modify the filter context. What do you mean by override filter context? This is very important. Please pay close attention. I will explain in a matter of 2 minutes. You should be able to understand. Or why to use so many tables? I just simply will use this one. I'm going to create another measure. Okay, here all measure with simple example. I will start with a simple example. I'm going to use a calculate function is helpful to override or modify the existing filter context. That is what I said. You remember this. And sum of sales, I have created a measure, right? So this sum of sales measure is holding sum of sales. This is a measure. You remember that this is what I created it. And, I'm going to use something called all function. Okay, here what I do is I'm going to use something like category. I need to put one more parenthesis. Press enter. Not column, measure. Okay, I'll just remove this one. I'll just use all measure. I'm going to use all selected. Okay, so here I'm going to use the slicer. In this case I've used category, isn't it? I'm going to use a category here, the slicer. Okay, if you see here, these two column values are repeated. For each row, these two values are repeated. Why it is repeated? Because I'm using a function called all function. The all function, what it does is it ignores the filter. Simply ignore the or remove the filter. On which column? I have mentioned about the column here. For this column category, you ignore the filter, right? For this column, you ignore the filter and do the total sales. Perform the total sales by ignoring the category columns filter. So here I created a filter or slicer on on this category column. When I select furniture, when I select technology, it still gives me the 1 second, all measure and supplies 4,99,000 and furniture gives me 2,60,000, 4,99,000, 2,62,000. 1 second, I think something wrong here. All selected, I used it, right? All selected measure, category and sum of sales measure, and here I used what? All measure. Yeah, all, it's correct only, monthly sales category, fine. So now if you see here, when I selected, okay, for the time being I just I just clear this first. First you remember this value. What is this value? 4,99,000. This is the overall total sales. Okay. When I apply the filter on this visual, what happens is the calculate, since I use the calculate function, it modifies the filter context here. The default, it modifies the default behavior of the filter context. You remember initially when I dragged and dropped this value into a table, it was showing only one value, the total sales. Along with that, when I dragged and dropped any categorical variable, this value was broken down to each, it was showing the split up for each region or each country, isn't it? Same way here, category. For each category, what is the split up? So for this category, what is the sales? Out of this, 262K, 129K sales we made in furniture category. Out of this total sales, 132K we made sales in technology. We are very particular in furniture and technology only. Fine. But what is the overall total? You remember we saw 499K. This one is not getting changed even though I applied the filter. Since I use the all function on the category column, the calculate function, what it does is it is removing this filter. It is not taking into account of this filter, irrespective of the fact that I applied the filter based on these two category. Still it repeats the values the overall sales here. You understood? This is the functionality of all function. All function ignores the filter. Okay, next one is all selected. All selected also ignore the filter, but it ignores the filter, it ignores the default filter. You just think that way. What is the default filter? See, if you need to pay close attention. I just copy paste this one. Look here. I use a very simple term. Okay, so category wise sales. Okay, here I am going to remove the all measure also. I am going to say only, I am going to remove this one now. When I drag and drop this measure, what is the measure? 1 second. What is the measure here? Sales, right? In this case, sales. We have created the sales is the implicit measure, but we created an explicit measure. I am going to put that one itself here. Instead of using implicit, we are going to use the explicit measure. So same thing is sum of sales is sum of sales, that is there, but this is by default it computes the total sales. Okay, this is the overall sales. The second step, what I did, when I dragged and dropped the category column here, automatically it gives me the split for this total sale. This is the default behavior of the filter context. It automatically gives me the breakdown for each category out of this total sales. Full stop. The next one, what I did, I created a measure. In that measure I used all. So what I did, I used all function. All functions simply ignore the filter, irrespective of the items that I selected. Don't show me only the total sales. That's why it's repeating it. I'll tell you why, how it is helpful in a little while. So this is the one. Here it is showing this total value only, right? So but it is not showing the default filter behavior. So this gives me the total sales for the furniture category and total sales for the technology category. But here it is repeating these two values. So the difference between all and all selected is, all function, when you use all function, it simply ignores or remove the filters, no matter which category you selected. In this case, we have used all function on the category column, right? So hence it simply removes the filter. It still stores me the value, overall total repeats it here. Next one is all selected. All selected also ignores the filter, but it repeats the values it repeats the total sales for the visible values. For this, what is the total sales? 1 lakh. So this is the one, right? This value is repeated here. For the visible item, the total sales for the visible items, it repeats it. Whereas here it repeats the overall sales for all the records. Because I am using all. You understood, right? All selected. So now I just go here only for the selected columns, right? So selected columns, you ignore the filter. Sorry, selected values. For the selected values, you ignore the filter. But here, ignore the filter for all the category. So only the selected category. For this selected furniture and technology, it ignored the default filter. That means it is ignored this default filter. It is repeating the value for these two. So if I select, for example, if I select furniture, what will happen? So what is this is the one, the total sales for this. Sorry, if I select furniture technology only, if I select technology only, what we see, even in this case, it shows the overall total. But since we have since we have only one value here, this value is shown here. But only when you select more than one value, you will understand the functionality of all selected. So when you apply all function, it ignores all the filter. No matter what filter you apply, it still remain as it is. It gives me the overall sales. But here it gives me here also it repeats the value, but it repeats the value for the selected categories total sales only. Got it? So now I will show you why this is required. See here, column wise total is okay, it is possible. If you want to have the, let's say I want to find out the margin contribution of each category or the sales contribution by each category, how will you find out? If I ask you, can you tell me the percentage of sales or revenue contribution by each category, how will you tell me? This value divided by this one into 100, or this value divided by this one will tell you what is the percentage of revenue that we made for each category. Similarly, technology sales divided by overall sales will give you the percentage of contribution of this category. Each category is percentage of contribution of revenue out of the total sales in simple term, right? How will you find out? You need to you need to divide this each value by the overall sales. That's a simple thing, right? So in order to do that, I will have to have the overall total value here, right? So only then I can divide by this, this one by this one, right? I can divide this value by this one, and I can divide this value by this one. So if I have the value available in row level, I can do that. If it is not available here, like Excel, we cannot take this one and divide by this one, take this value and divide this one, we cannot tell here. But if it is the Excel thing, right, we create another column, and then what we do is this value divided by this value, you put it, and then you can drag and drop it. Automatically it gives you the percentage of contribution of each category of the total sales. It will show automatically, but here it is not like that. Here in this case, you need to take the overall sales value here. What is my overall sales? 4,99,619. So sorry, here okay. So now I just create another measure. With that you will be able to understand very clearly. One second. I'm going to create another measure. By category. So here what I do is I just go and say calculate, or simply I say the sum of sales we already have, right? Sum of, or we use divide function. Divide function is very much helpful. This is also another DAX function. The numerator is sum of sales, in this case sum of sales measure, comma, the denominator is our the all measure, right? So all measure, that's all. .26, it correctly shows us, right? So if I divide this one by this total, okay, so 0.26, and if I divide this one by this one, so out of the total sales, what is the revenue contribution by furniture and office supplies? With this we can tell. Now if I ask you this question, okay, I don't want the overall sales. Okay, out of the items what I have chosen it here, you tell me the percentage of revenue generated for for these two items, two categories total only. So one likely because you are a manager, you are taking care of only furniture and office supplies. You want to find out, you are very particular about. Now for these two items only I am responsible. What is the total sales here? 3,66,000. In this case, 1,29,000 divided by 366 and 237 divided by 366. If the top level manager, CEO is asking me, tell me the revenue contribution of your category out of the total sales, then this is for CEO. This is for my, let's I am the category manager for these two categories and I am interested in this one only, right? But you can give, with this you can give both. So what you do is I am going to select this one, I am going to create another measure, sorry. So the beauty of all selected, right, with this you can perform additional insight, right? You can extend your analytics. For visible light, something like visible thing. Here instead of using all measure, I'm going to say all selected measure. Look here, this one divided by this. Since the denominator is lesser than this one, obviously it shows more. See, if you tell your CEO the percentage of revenue contribution by furniture category is 35%, office supply 65%, right? You will think, oh great. But you know what he will ask, right? The next question is, okay, tell me out of the total sales, what is the revenue contribution by these two categories? When you are very subjective with respect to only these two categories, then you will think these two are great. 65% of the revenue contribution by my category office supplies out of the total sales. But overall sales, if you take it, you get this. Hope you understood with this one, right? So now you understood, how the DAX function is helpful in terms of extending our analytics to see. Usually we take only this one. What is the overall contribution, right? So of the total sales, each category's contribution only we are very particular in general. But with all selected, now we are able to go extra mile and find out or narrow down, right? So we can get both the tactical level and strategic level. We can get the clear picture. We get to know the the correct picture. We are not supposed to get biased, right? So let's say when I furniture and office supplies, when I select these two, I'm very subjective, right? I'm biased. I'm very subjective. I'm say, hey, 65% of revenue contribution from my side, especially in office supplies category. But tell me in the overall how much. But when you select technology also, you will get to know technology is 0.27. Yeah, overall office supply is great, but still, right? If you cannot say it's a 0.65, isn't it? You cannot say 0.65. It is misleading. So only when you, along with this, if you use them, but in order to achieve this one, all selected function is very much helpful. For the visible values, find out give me the total sales, okay, and give me the overall total sales. With all function we can get it. With these two total, we are able to say the revenue contribution out of the total sales and revenue contribution out of the visible values. That's it. Any questions so far? It's already 5:40. I have a lot of escalations, no sleep, nothing. 4 a.m. I got up today morning. So this is what the difference all and all selected. All except is very, very simple one. In the next session, I will help you with other things. No doubt. Excellent. If you are able to understand, very good. I'll be very happy. Good. So tomorrow also will continue, and day after tomorrow also will continue. Right. So this week we will spend on a daily basis, so that we will also have continuation. I want you guys to come back with more and more questions. Probably use some Excel sheet, put all your doubts there. Okay, and then come back with more questions. I'm planning to create a common sheet wherein all the batches questions I'll put it there, all the all their questions and the answers I'll put it there. Okay, and so that those question answers can also be helpful to clear the interview. Okay, fine. Since you don't have any questions, I'm going to it's recorded. Good. So I'm going to end the session now. Okay. Yeah, interview questions. It is there in my website, isn't it, Vijay? Yeah, so interview questions are there, but we'll give you some assignments, some more assignment, but I want you to work on that, okay? And the real-time use cases related, the scenarios, if you work on it, so you can face any kind of interview. I'll share some real-time use cases also. It is very interesting one. Start work on it. I'll share some other videos also mine, okay? You can watch that one. Since I am hurry-burryly taking the class, right? Maybe the flow may not be that good, but the content is really very much helpful. Okay, the use cases, everything. Okay, you can go by that content, and the use cases are really helpful to clear the interview. Okay, and also you can tell them what challenges that you post in the interview. They'll ask that one only, right? What challenges that you post and how